Scandinavia, ́skændᵻ្neɪviə, is a historical and cultural region in northern Europe characterized by common ethno-cultural North Germanic heritage, and mutually intelligible North Germanic languages. The term Scandinavia always includes the mainlands of the three kingdoms of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Norwegian dependencies, including Svalbard and Jan Mayen, are usually not seen as a part of Scandinavia, nor is Danish Greenland. However, the Danish Faroe Islands are sometimes included, as sometimes are Iceland and Finland, because of their historical association with the Scandinavian countries and the Scandinavian peoples and languages. This looser definition almost equates to that of the Nordic countries. In Nordic languages, only mainland Denmark, Norway and Sweden are commonly included in the definition. In English usage, Scandinavia sometimes refers to the geographical area, also known as the Scandinavian Peninsula. The name Scandinavia originally referred vaguely to the formerly Danish, now Swedish, region Scania. The terms Scandinavia and Scandinavian entered usage in the late 18th century as terms for Denmark, Norway and Sweden, their Germanic majority peoples and associated language and culture. The term being introduced by the early linguistic and cultural Scandinavist movement. The majority of the population of Scandinavia are descended from several Germanic tribes who originally inhabited the southern part of Scandinavia, and spoke a Germanic language that evolved into Old Norse. Icelanders and the Faroese are to a significant extent descended from the Norse, and are therefore often seen as Scandinavian. Finland is mainly populated by Finns, with a significant minority of Swedish speakers. A small minority of Sami people live in the extreme north of Scandinavia. The Danish-Norwegian and Swedish languages form a dialect continuum and are known as the Scandinavian languages, all of which are considered mutually intelligible with one another. Faroese and Icelandic, sometimes referred to as insular Scandinavian languages, are intelligible in continental Scandinavian languages only to a limited extent. Finnish and Meänkieli are closely related to each other and more distantly to the Sami languages, but are entirely unrelated to the Scandinavian languages. Apart from these, German, Yiddish and Romani are recognized minority languages in Scandinavia. The southern and by far most populous regions of Scandinavia have a temperate climate. Scandinavia extends north of the Arctic Circle, but has relatively mild weather for its latitude due to the Gulf Stream. Much of the Scandinavian mountains have an alpine tundra climate. There are many lakes and moraines, legacies of the last glacial period, which ended about 10 millennia ago. Terminology in use. Scandinavia usually refers to Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Some sources argue for the inclusion of the Faroe Islands, Finland and Iceland, though that broader region is usually known by the countries concerned as Norden, or the Nordic countries. The use of the name Scandinavia as a convenient general term for the three kingdoms of Denmark, Norway and Sweden is fairly recent. According to some historians, it was adopted and introduced in the 18th century, at a time when the ideas about a common heritage started to appear and develop into early literary and linguistic Scandinavism. Before this time, the term Scandinavia was familiar mainly to classical scholars through Pliny the Elder's writings, and was used vaguely for Scania and the southern region of the peninsula. As a political term, Scandinavia was first used by students agitating for pan-Scandinavianism in the 1830s. The popular usage of the term in Sweden, Denmark and Norway as a unifying concept became established in the 19th century through poems such as Hans Christian Andersen's I May, Scandinavian of 1839. After a visit to Sweden, Andersen became a supporter of early political Scandinavism. In a letter describing the poem to a friend, he wrote, "All at once I understood how related the Swedes, the Danes and the Norwegians are, and with this feeling I wrote the poem immediately after my return. We are one people, we are called Scandinavians." Finland. The clearest example of the use of the term Scandinavia as a political and societal construct is the unique position of Finland, based largely on the fact that most of modern-day Finland was part of the Swedish kingdom for hundreds of years, thus to much of the world associating Finland with all of Scandinavia. But the creation of a Finnish identity is unique in the region in that it was formed in relation to two different imperial models, the Swedish and the Russian, as described by the University of Jyväskylä-based editorial board of the Finnish journal Yearbook of Political Thought and Conceptual History. The term is often defined according to the conventions of the cultures that lay claim to the term in their own use. When a speaker wants to explicitly include Finland alongside Scandinavia proper, the geographic terms ʻskændᵻʻneɪviə or ʻskændᵻˈneɪviə are sometimes used in English, although these terms are hardly if at all used within Scandinavia. More precisely, and subject to no dispute, is that Finland is included in the broader term Nordic countries. Societal and tourism promotional organizations. Various promotional agencies of the Nordic countries in the United States serve to promote market and tourism interests in the region. Today, the 5 Nordic heads of state act as the organization's patrons, and according to the official statement by the organization, its mission is to promote the Nordic region as a whole while increasing the visibility of Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway and Sweden in New York City and the United States. The official tourist boards of Scandinavia sometimes cooperate under one umbrella, such as the Scandinavian Tourist Board. The cooperation was introduced for the Asian market in 1986, when the Swedish National Tourist Board joined the Danish National Tourist Board to coordinate intergovernmental promotion of the two countries. Norway's government entered 1 year later. All 5 Nordic governments participate in the joint promotional efforts in the United States through the Scandinavian Tourist Board of North America. Use of Nordic countries versus Scandinavia. While the term Scandinavia is commonly used for Denmark, Norway and Sweden, the term the Nordic countries is used unambiguously for Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Iceland, including their associated territories. Scandinavia can thus be considered a subset of the Nordic countries. Furthermore, the term ʻskændᵻʻneɪviə refers to Scandinavia, Finland and Karelia, excluding Denmark and overseas territories. However, the usage of this term is restricted to geology, when speaking of the ʻskændᵻʻneɪviə shield. In addition to the mainland Scandinavian countries of Denmark, Norway, Sweden, the Nordic countries also consist of Finland, Iceland, Åland Islands, Faroe Islands, Greenland, Svalbard, which is under Norwegian sovereignty, is not considered part of Scandinavia as a cultural historical region, but is a part of the Kingdom of Norway. It is part of the Nordic countries. Estonia has applied for membership in the Nordic Council, referring to its cultural heritage and close linguistic links to Finland, and historical connections to both Denmark and Sweden. Although normally Estonia is regarded as one of the Baltic countries, it is similar to the situation of Finland around the 1920s, as Finland was considered to be one of the Baltic states as well, as it too had emerged from Russian domination along with the other 3 countries under similar circumstances. While Finnish and Estonian are Finnic languages, Latvian and Lithuanian are Baltic languages. It should be noted that whereas the term Scandinavia is relatively straightforward as traditionally relating to the 3 kingdoms of Denmark, Norway and Sweden there exists some ambiguity as regards the ethnic aspect of the concept in the modern era. Traditionally, the term refers specifically to the majority peoples of Denmark, Norway and Sweden, the states, their Germanic languages and the culture. In the modern era, the term will often include minority peoples such as the Sami and Meänkieli speakers in a political and to some extent cultural sense, as they are citizens of Scandinavian countries and speak Scandinavian languages either as the first or second language. However, Scandinavian is still also seen as an ethnic term for the Germanic majority peoples of Scandinavia, and as such, the inclusion of Sami and Finnish speakers can be seen as controversial within these groups. Etymology. Scandinavia and Scania are considered to have the same etymology. Both terms are thought to go back to the Proto-Germanic compound **skænd:ᵘviə, which appears later in Old English as Sardenigan, in Old Norse as skæni. The earliest identified source for the name Scandinavia is Pliny the Elder's Natural History, dated to the 1st century AD. Various references to the region can also be found in Pythias, Pomponius Mela, Tacitus, Ptolemy, Procopius and Jordanus, usually in the form of Skansa. It is believed that the name used by Pliny may be of West Germanic origin, originally denoting Scania. According to some scholars, the Germanic stem can be reconstructed as **skathen, meaning danger or damage. The second segment of the name has been reconstructed as **korho, meaning land on the water or island. The name Scandinavia would then mean dangerous island, which is considered to refer to the treacherous sandbanks surrounding Scania. Scania in Scania, with its long Falsterbo reef, has the same stem combined with or, which means sandbanks. In the reconstructed Germanic root **skathen, the first segment is sometimes considered more uncertain than the second segment. The American Heritage Dictionary derived the second segment from Proto-Indo-European *aqua, water, in the sense of watery land. The Old Norse goddess name Skathi, along with Scandinavia and Skani, may be related to Gothic Skardus, Old English Sedu, Old Saxon Skardo, and Old High German Skato. Scholar John McKinnell comments that this etymology suggests that the goddess Skathi may have once been a personification of the geographical region, if Scandinavia, or associated with the underworld. Pliny the Elder's descriptions. Pliny's descriptions of Scandinavia and surrounding areas are not always easy to decipher. Writing in the capacity of a Roman admiral, he introduces the northern region by declaring to his Roman readers that there are 23 islands, Romanis armis cognati, in this area. According to Pliny, the clarissima of the region's islands is Scandinavia, of unknown size. There live the Hilavianes. The belief that Scandinavia was an island became widespread among classical authors during the 1st century and dominated descriptions of Scandinavia in classical texts during the centuries that followed. Pliny begins his description of the route to Scandinavia by referring to the mountain of Sevo, the Kodanispe and the Cimbrian promontory. The geographical features have been identified in various ways by some scholars. Sevo is thought to be the mountainous Norwegian coast at the entrance to Skagerrak, and the Cimbrian peninsula is thought to be Skagen, the north tip of Jutland, Denmark. As described, Sevo and Scandinavia can also be the same place. Pliny mentions Scandinavia one more time. In Book 8 he says that the animal called Atlas was born on the island of Scandinavia. The animal grazes, has a big upper lip and some mythical attributes. The name Scandia, later used as a synonym for Scandinavia, also appears in Pliny's Naturalis Historia, but is used for a group of northern European islands which he locates north of Britannia. Scandia thus does not appear to be denoting the island Scandinavia in Pliny's Pliny's text. The idea that Scandinavia may have been one of the Scandi Islands was instead introduced by Ptolemy, a mathematician, geographer and astrologer of Rome and Egypt. He used the name Scandia for the biggest, most easterly of the three Scandia Islands, which according to him were all located east of Jutland. Neither Pliny's nor Ptolemy's lists of Scandinavian tribes include the Sueons mentioned by Tacitus. Some early Swedish scholars of the Swedish Hyperborean school and of the 19th century Romantic nationalism period proceeded to synthesize the different versions by inserting references to the Sueons, arguing that they must have been referred to in the original text and obscured over time by spelling mistakes or various alterations. Germanic reconstruction. The Latin names in Pliny's text gave rise to different forms in medieval Germanic texts. In Jordan's History of the Goths, the form Skanza is the name used for their original home, separated by sea from the land of Europe. Where Jordanus meant to locate this quasi-legendary island is still a hotly debated issue, both in scholarly discussions and in the nationalistic discourse of various European countries. The form Scandinavia as the original home of the Langobards appears in Paulus Diagonus's Historia Langobardorum. In other versions of Historia Langobardorum appear the forms Skarden, Skandanen, Skadanen and Skatanage. Frankish sources use Skonauer and Ethelweird. An Anglo-Saxon historian used Scani. In Beowulf, the forms Sedenage and Sedeland are used, while the Alfredian translation of Orosius and Wulfstan's travel accounts used the Old English Skåne. Sami etymology. The earliest Sami-Yoic texts written down refer to the world as Skardisi Suolo and Skardjul, meaning Skarthi's island. Svenung considers the Sami name to have been introduced as a loan word from the North Germanic languages. Skathi is the giant stepmother of Frey, and Freya in Norse mythology. It has been suggested that Skathi to some extent is modeled on a Sami woman. The name for Skade's father Thjazi is known in Sami as Kachi, the waterman, and her son with Odin, Seming, can be interpreted as a descendant of Saam, the Sami population. Older Joic texts give evidence of the old Sami belief about living on an island and state that the wolf is known as Suolujevra, meaning the strong one on the island. The Sami place name Sullaridsielma means the island's threshold, and Suolasilgi means the island's back. In recent substrate studies, Sami linguists have examined the initial cluster sk in words used in Sami and concluded that sk is a phonotactic structure of alien origin. Other etymologies. Another possibility is that all or part of the segments of the name came from the Mesolithic people inhabiting the region. In modernity, Scandinavia is a peninsula, but between approximately 10,300 and 9,500 years ago, the southern part of Scandinavia was an island separated from the northern peninsula, with water exiting the Baltic Sea through the area where Stockholm is now located. Some Basque scholars have presented the idea that the segment sk that appears in asterisks Cathanoiho is connected to the name for the Yusko peoples, akin to Basques that populated Paleolithic Europe. According to some of these intellects, Scandinavian people share particular genetic markers with the Basque people. Geography. The geography of Scandinavia is extremely varied. Notable are the Norwegian fjords, the Scandinavian mountains, the flat, low areas in Denmark, and the archipelagos of Sweden and Norway. Sweden has many lakes and moraines, legacies of the Ice Age. The climate varies from north to south and from west to east. A marine west coast climate typical of Western Europe dominates in Denmark. southernmost part of Sweden and along the west coast of Norway, reaching north to 65 degrees north, with orographic lift giving more mm per year precipitation in some areas in western Norway. The central part, from Oslo to Stockholm, has a humid continental climate, which gradually gives way to subarctic climate further north and cool marine west coast climate along the northwestern coast. A small area along the northern coast east of the North Cape has tundra climate as a result of a lack of summer warmth. The Scandinavian mountains block the mild and moist air coming from the southwest. Thus northern Sweden and the Finnmarksvidda plateau in Norway receive little precipitation and have cold winters. Large areas in the Scandinavian mountains have alpine tundra climate. The warmest temperature ever recorded in Scandinavia is 38.0 degrees Celsius in Malilla. The coldest temperature ever recorded is -52.6 degrees Celsius in Vuogajam. The coldest month was February 1985 in Vatangi with a mean of -27.2 degrees Celsius. Southwesterly winds further warmed by föhn wind can give warm temperatures in narrow Norwegian fjords in winter. Tafjord has recorded 17.9 degrees Celsius in January and Sundal 18.9 degrees Celsius in February. Languages in Scandinavia. Two language groups have coexisted on the Scandinavian peninsula since prehistory: the North Germanic languages and the Sami languages. Due to later migrations, Finnish, Yiddish and Romani have also been spoken for over 100 years. Denmark also has a minority of German speakers. More recent migrations has added even more languages. Apart from Sami and the languages of minority groups speaking a variant of the majority language of a neighboring state, the following minority languages in Scandinavia are protected under the European Charter for Regional and Minority Languages: Yiddish, Romani Chib, Romanes and Romani. North Germanic languages. The North Germanic languages of Scandinavia are traditionally divided into an East Scandinavian branch and a West Scandinavian branch, but because of changes appearing in the languages since 1600, the East Scandinavian and West Scandinavian branches are now usually reconfigured into Insular Scandinavian, featuring Icelandic and Faroese, and Continental Scandinavian, comprising Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish. The modern division is based on the degree of mutual comprehensibility between the languages in the two branches. The populations of the Scandinavian countries, with the Scandinavian mother tongue, can, at least with some training, understand each other's standard languages as they appear in print and are heard on radio and television. The reason Danish, Swedish and the two official written versions of Norwegian are traditionally viewed as different languages, rather than dialects of one common language, is that each is a well-established standard language in its respective country. Danish, Swedish and Norwegian have, since medieval times, been influenced to varying degrees by Middle Low German and Standard German. A substantial amount of that influence was a byproduct of the economic activity generated by the Hanseatic League. Norwegians are accustomed to variation, and may perceive Danish and Swedish only as slightly more distant dialects. This is because they have two official written standards, in addition to the habit of strongly holding on to local dialects. The people of Stockholm, Sweden and Copenhagen, Denmark, have the greatest difficulty in understanding other Scandinavian languages. In the Faroe Islands and Iceland, learning Danish is mandatory. This causes Faroese people as well as Icelandic people to become bilingual in two very distinct North Germanic languages, making it it relatively easy for them to understand the other two mainland Scandinavian languages. Although Iceland was under the political control of Denmark until a much later date, very little influence and borrowing from Danish has occurred in the Icelandic language. Icelandic remained the preferred language among the ruling classes in Iceland. Danish was not used for official communications. Most of the royal officials were of Icelandic descent, and the language of the church and law courts remained Icelandic. Finnish. The Scandinavian languages are entirely unrelated to Finnish, Estonian, and Sami languages, which as Uralic languages are distantly related to Hungarian. Owing to the close proximity, there is still a great deal of borrowing from the Swedish and Norwegian languages in the Finnish and Sami languages. The long history of linguistic influence of Swedish on Finnish is also due to the fact that Finnish, the language of the majority in Finland, was treated as a minority language while Finland was part of Sweden. Finnish speakers had to learn Swedish in order to advance to higher positions. Swedish spoken in today's Finland includes a lot of words that are borrowed from Finnish, whereas the written language remains closer to that of Sweden. Finland is officially bilingual, with Finnish and Swedish having mostly the same status at national level. Finland's majority population are Finns, whose mother tongue is either Finnish, Swedish or both. The Swedish-speaking minority lives mainly on the coast from the city of Porvoo in the Gulf of Finland to the city of Kokkola, up in the Bothnian Bay. The Åland Islands, an autonomous province of Finland, situated in the Baltic Sea between Finland and Sweden, is entirely Swedish-speaking. Children are taught the other official language at school. For Swedish speakers, this is Finnish, and for Finnish speakers, Swedish. Finnish speakers constitute a language minority in Sweden and Norway. There are also languages derived from Finnish, having evolved separately, known as meänkieli in Sweden and kven in Norway. Sami languages. The Sami languages are indigenous minority languages in Scandinavia. They belong to their own branch of the Uralic language family and are unrelated to the North Germanic languages other than by limited grammatical characteristics resulting from prolonged contact. Sami is divided into several languages or dialects. Consonant gradation is a feature in both Finnish and Northern Sami dialects, but it is not present in South Sami, which is considered to have a different language history. According to the Sami Information Center of the Sami Parliament in Sweden, Southern Sami may have originated in an earlier migration from the south into the Scandinavian peninsula.